Welcome to this walkthrough of my Waterloo collection, specifically the Anglo-Dutch army in the field of that day. These are all 28mm figures representing the entire order of battle. Everything is laid out on a table of 10 foot by 6 foot, which, as you can see here, just barely fits if I let the units overhang a little bit. We'll start our journey with the 1st British divisions that you see right here. These are the guards, composed of 2 brigades, and on the right there you see some divisional artillery. We'll then sweep forward to 1st Corps command organization, the Prince of Orange there on the large base, then the 2 divisional commanders, and then we'll have 3rd Division here. In the front we have 5th British Brigade, then we have the 2nd King's German Legion with their light infantry, and finally Graf Kielmanek's Hanoverian 1st Brigade, and then some divisional artillery. We're sweeping over to the 2 Netherlands Division with 2nd Division on the right and 3rd Division on the left there. In the back we have 2nd Brigade of 2nd Division, which are those lovely large Nassau regiments, and then some artillery batteries, which are quite large. The Dutch used 4 sections rather than the British 3. We then moving over here to 2nd Corps, commanded by Rowland Hill on the big base there. This is largely composed of 2nd Division. We see here Adams' Light Brigade with the rifles, the 1st KGL, and then some more Hanoverian and divisional artillery. Finally, in the back there, we have 4th Division. This is just a few British units. Almost the entire division was placed in the rear to guard the retreat around Hall. So just a 3 units there. Now we're moving over to the reserves. These are 2 divisions, British 8th, British 9th. The 8th here under Picton is the larger one with its 2 Highland brigades. And on the left there you see Winke's Hanoverian, as well as divisional artillery there, right there in the middle. You see the Black Watch. And then we have 9th Division. Again, just a small number of British regiments and a brigade of Hanoverians, some divisional artillery. Most of the division did not make it onto the field. Finally, here we have in command the Duke himself, the Duke of Wellington, and then we're sweeping over to the Brunswick contingent. The Duke is on the left there, Duke of Brunswick. We have the Jaegers in front, the light regiments here, then the line regiments, the artillery, horse and foot in the front, horse in the rear, and the actual cavalry, including the small regiment of lancers. And then in the back we have the independent Nassau regiment with those lovely greenly uniformed troops. We have the Earl of Uxbridge here for the cavalry, overall command of the cavalry corps. On the right side we have the heavies, left side the dragoons, light dragoons. You see here the front the household brigade, and then here the Union Brigade with the Scots Greys right in the middle there on their grey horses. In the back in green we have the Duke of Cumberland Hussars, which is a Hanoverian unit that famously ran away from the field. And there we have lots of Royal Horse artillery and some half batteries of the Dutch. And then we sweep forward. Here on the right are the British Hussars, on the left the Netherlands Cavalry Division with the lights in the rear, and then the 3 heavy dragoon regiments in the front and their independent command staff. Now that you've seen the entire collection, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the origin of this project and the process I used to bring it to a conclusion in a relatively short time frame. Waterloo is fortunately, of course, very well documented. There's a massive amount of information out on the internet about unit strength and engagement strength and commanders and so forth. So I started with just a list of all the units and their troop count at the battle. I then used various maps, like the ones shown here, to show the position of units and get a sense for the portion of the order of battle that was actually engaged on June 18th, 1815. So that eliminated a section of 4th British Division, as well as a bunch of Dutch militia and Hanoverian Landwehr units that were posted in the rear or on the far right and really didn't play any role in the battle. From that, I developed the active order of battle, that I actually wanted to replicate. And then the next step, as you would imagine, was just to buy a ton and ton of models. All in, this collection has 3,105 figurines, which required a logistics effort all by itself to procure and then to prepare. I typically did all this in a large batch effort at the beginning. That means taking all the models, cleaning them, prepping them, spray priming them. I glue them onto large dental pressers, basically popsicle sticks, and then sorted them into my special project drawer units you see pictured here, which had at a brigade level sets of models for each of the brigades and for each of the cavalry formations. With the models bought, I started preparing the base configuration. You see here a snapshot of Dutch brigade, Dutch Belgium brigade, with the base labels, the flags prepared. The flags are all from GMB flags, with a few exceptions where I couldn't find them in their catalog. The labels are homemade. The bases themselves are 3mm MDF bases from war bases in the UK. They provide wonderful service. And I've used 50mm as my default configuration for almost everything in the collection. So 50mm square, 50 by 50, is the base unit size for infantry and cavalry. 50mm round is used for skirmishers. And I've done this just to create a sense of uniformity to the collection. I find that 3 models in file, 2 deep, so 6 models per base, make the right kind of densely packed impression that you would expect from Napoleonic formations, while cavalry with 2 per base looks quite clean and quite nice on 50mm. So the core infantry unit, a standard size regiment of somewhere around 400 to 600 men, would then be represented by 4 such bases with 6 per base, so 24 per regiment. Central colors, obviously, command group and so forth, flank companies, grenadiers, and light troops on the wings. And then, in addition to those 4 bases, I added, for most units, a base of skirmishers, these on a round 50mm base, and a casualty marker on a little dial from war bases that is 40mm with a little indicator from 1 to 12 to track wounds or fatigue or whatever your favorite game system uses. Some units that deployed in full skirmish formations were based as such on 50mm bases. You see here an example of rifles. And that captures pretty much all the infantry. Very small units were based with just 2 bases. Large regiments above 800 or so troops, like the British Guards or some of the Nassau regiments, were based with 6 bases to give you an extended line or column formation. For cavalry, I've used 2 bases, so 4 models per squadron. The typical 3 squadron formation of the British has 2 such squadrons in front and 1 in the rear line. You end up with 8 bases, 4 by 2 deep. If you have a 4 squadron larger formation and just a single row of 2 bases, if you have a small squadron like the British Life Guard. Finally, for artillery, this is the only place where I didn't use my 50mm standard bases. I find that artillery always looks very cramped if you base them small. That might work for gameplay purposes, but it just doesn't reflect reality on the Napoleonic battlefields if cannons are lined up wheel to wheel in a kind of parking lot configuration. It also doesn't give you room for crude diorama. And in reality, a battery would typically be spread out to roughly the same frontage as a battalion in line. And so I used the same process, a battery of British guns using 3 sections, so 6 guns, 5 or 6 guns typically in 3 sections, would be represented by 3 actual gun figures on a base that is 20 centimeters wide and 10 deep. And if it was foot artillery, or attached limbers in the back on separate on separate bases just for visual appeal. Large batteries of 4 gun sections would go on a 30 millimeter base, and small ones with 2 or even 1 section would be at 15 and 10 respectively. These are quite hefty, but I think they visually look nice and demonstrate what you would want to achieve with real battery on the field. Then we come to the command structures, and there I used the size of the base and the model count as a quick visual indicator for the level of command. At the very top, you have Army and Corps commanders. These come on a 10 centimeter base, round. All the command bases are round base using 3 models. And you see here, for example, the Duke himself, Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, with his engineering advisor and chief of staff, well, his private secretary. And for each of the higher level commands, so division and up, I also added an ADC on a separate little dial base, the same 40 millimeter dial base as the casualty markers. Some game systems require you to count the number of ADCs or special orders and things like this. And this gave me some visual tie-in. And I typically try to pick an ADC that would have actually served in that capacity, or somebody from the battalions that were in that formation, or something representing that division or corps level command. One level down at the division level, we have 7.5 centimeter bases with 2 models. Those are typically the actual division commander and some kind of second senior level colonel or advisor or chief of staff, something like that. And then again an ADC marker. And then finally at the lowest level, we have on the standard 50 millimeter base, a single model as brigade level commander. Rounding that out, I've also added some extra bases for visual appeal. So here we have the Dutch chief of staff with a small staff organization supporting the Prince of Orange, who was on a separate corps level base. Made some vignettes as well. These are from this particular one's from Perry Miniatures, but these are different scenes representing the life in the field or other little tidbits, some field service, a field smithy here, support infrastructure, and so forth. And then finally, I printed with a 3D printer, kind of labeling display bases for each of the units. These are pretty simplistic. They hold the 4-base unit, or in some cases 6-base units, information with a little lip up front on which I just put a little printed label showing the unit. Of course, each of these bases is labeled at the bottom, as I showed previously, with the full designation and unit information. But who has time to flip them all over? So this gives you a simple visual appeal. And if you actually use these for gameplays, you can just flip the bases around, and then the label will be facing the player. So this kind of wraps up the collection design. The models themselves are painted over a beige Games Workshop Racebone primer, and then just painted largely with contrast paints, except the metallics. I, at the end, gave them all a coat of AK Interactive matte varnish. I find that unifies the look of the contrast paints quite nicely. It doesn't have that sort of shiny or mixed satin texture that contrast paints often finish with. And it also kind of crystallizes out some of the highlights I find in a way that is difficult for me to describe. Finally, the models were based with Geek Gaming base ready. This is a mix of patchy plains and just green grass, because a bit of a richer appearance, with some tufts of flowers and grass and other bits and pieces, as you can see here, just to tie them in. At this scale, there's only so much you can spend on basing before you go absolutely crazy. There are hundreds and hundreds of bases, obviously, in this collection. But I think this gives an overarching, decent visual appeal. Added the flags from GMB Designs, and that's it. And then finally, at something of this scale, this can't stay on my table forever, so it's got to move in its own cabinet. I have a dedicated room for this collection with a very large 12-foot wide cabinet section that will host all of this. And for that room, just to sort of finish the touch, I took the map that I showed earlier, had it printed on a plaque print on a big piece of wood that is mounted to kind of show in the seating area in front of the display what the battle looked like, as a small quirk. You can actually remove that plaque from the wall, and behind it is a framed section of 4x3 with grass terrain on it that can be put on a little coffee table up front to play skirmish games. Knowing that that's back there just makes me happy. This is it for the Waterloo collection. I appreciate your attention, and wish you all the best in your own hobby projects. This is exciting stuff. The whole project took me about 21 months from start to finish. So now I'm facing the Prussians and then afterwards the French. The Prussians are already beginning to be assembled in that same special project drawer, and then we go from there. Thank you very much, and keep on hobbying. Bye-bye.